Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So today we're tackling something that's, well, pretty deep. Schema therapy,
Oh, yeah. That's getting into some really interesting territory.
for sure. We've got excerpts from this article, Unlocking Patterns. It's all about how schema therapy can help you break free from, those kind of stubborn habits and patterns we all have.
It's funny, right? Like, we know some things aren't working, but we keep doing them.
Exactly. And this article says those patterns, they might be driven by these things called schemas. Ever heard of them?
Absolutely. Schemas are like these core beliefs we hold about ourselves, about other people, about the whole world, really. They're kind of like filters. They color how we see everything.
Okay, so like if I see the world as a dangerous place, that's a schema.
Could be. And here's the thing, they often form way, way back in childhood.
Childhood, huh? So like how does that work?
Well, think about it. As kids, we all have certain fundamental needs, right? Like we need to feel safe and secure, we need to feel loved and accepted.
But sometimes those needs, those core needs, they don't get met consistently.
Okay, so like what happens if a kid's need for, I don't know, secure attachment to their parents, like if that need isn't consistently met?
Well, that child, they might start developing a schema about being unworthy of love or a schema about always being abandoned.
Whoa. So that can like play out in their adult relationship?
A big time.
Yeah.
They might be constantly seeking validation,
Mm,
feeling insecure, maybe even sabotaging good relationships because of that fear.
that's heavy stuff. So those early experiences can really have a lasting impact, huh?
Oh, absolutely. And the schemas that cause the most trouble, the ones that really mess with us in adulthood, those are what we call early maladaptive schemas.
Early maladaptive schemas. So like the troublemakers in our minds.
You got it. They're the ones whispering those negative beliefs,
Mm.
influencing our decisions, even when we don't realize it.
Okay, so we've got these schemas, maybe some not so great ones from childhood. How do we even begin to change them? I mean, they sound pretty deeply rooted.
That's where schema therapy comes in.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, dwelling on the past, like rehashing every childhood trauma. It's about understanding how those experiences are still impacting us now, and then learning new ways to respond.
So it's not just therapy for your inner child, it's like for your present self.
Right on. It's about bridging that gap, seeing the connections, and then taking action to change the patterns.
Okay, so we're not stuck with these things forever.
Nope. But to change them, we got to understand them. And one key concept here is schema modes.
Schema modes, hit me with it.
So have you ever, just reacted in a way that didn't feel like you, like way out of character?
Oh, all the time.
That might be a schema mode taking over. These emotional states that get triggered when a specific schema gets activated.
Whoa, okay. So, example.
Let's say you have that abandonment schema we talked about,
Yeah.
and your partner's late, doesn't text back. Suddenly you're spiraling, convinced they're leaving you.
That's not hypothetical at all.
Right. That could be your vulnerable child mode getting triggered, feeling helpless, scared, like that little kid who needed their parent.
Okay, I'm getting chills. This is like way too relatable.
It is for a lot of people. And there are other modes too, like the angry child, all rebellious and lashing out, or the punitive parent, just berating yourself constantly.
Like the punitive parent, that's like my inner critic on steroids.
It can be brutal. Schema therapy helps you, first of all, just recognize these different modes, where they come from, what triggers them, and then you learn healthier ways to cope.
So instead of letting those modes run the show,
You become the director.
I like that. But how do we actually do that?
Well, the article talks about this woman, Sarah. She's a great example of how this all plays out in real life.
Okay, so we've established, like, we've all got these schemas going on in our heads. But how does schema therapy actually help us change them?
That's the exciting part. Schema therapy, it's almost a blend of different therapy approaches.
Like a greatest hits album.
Kind of, yeah. It takes some of the best stuff from cognitive behavioral therapy,
CBT.
right, CBT, helps you challenge those negative thoughts. But it also uses elements of attachment theory to explore those early relationships, and how they shaped your beliefs. And it even borrows from Gestalt therapy, which is all about connecting with your emotions right here, right now.
So it's not like one size fits all.
Exactly. It's about finding the right combo, the right tools for you. So for instance, you might use those CBT techniques to identify and challenge thoughts that are like totally schema driven.
So like, give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you have that abandonment schema.
Yeah.
You might constantly be thinking, everyone I love is going to leave me eventually.
Ooh, yeah, I know that feeling.
Right. So with CBT, you would kind of learn to question that thought. Like, look for evidence. Is it really true? And come up with a more balanced perspective.
Makes sense. But schemas, they're not just thoughts, right? There's a whole emotional side too.
Huge emotional component. And that's where attachment theory comes in. You start to explore those early relationships, with your parents,
Yeah.
caregivers, and you start to see how those experiences like literally shaped your beliefs.
It's like those early patterns are playing out in our adult lives.
Exactly. And then Gestalt therapy techniques, they can be super powerful for helping you like actually connect with those emotions, like in this moment.
So not just thinking about it, but feeling it.
Yeah, really experiencing those feelings fully
Yeah.
without judgment and learning to like regulate them so you're not just overwhelmed.
Wow. Okay, so schema therapy is pretty like holistic then. It's the thoughts, the feelings, the
And
behavior.
it gets to the root of it. It's not just about putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms,
I'm
right?
taking this. And the article mentioned personality disorders. How does schema therapy approach something that complex?
So personality disorders, they involve these like really ingrained patterns, right?
Mm.
In the way you think, feel, and behave. And they cause, obviously, a lot of distress, problems in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Schema therapy, it kind of provides a framework to understand these patterns. It's saying, hey, these might be coming from those early maladaptive schemas we've been talking about.
So it's not just managing the symptoms of the disorder, it's like going deeper.
It's saying, hey, let's look at those underlying schemas that are driving all of this.
I love that. And what about anxiety? The article mentioned that
Oh,
too.
yeah. Anxiety, it often comes from like schemas that trigger fear or insecurity or like feeling not good enough.
Like that abandonment schema we were talking about.
Could be. Or the vulnerability schema, where you're
Yeah.
just constantly worried that something bad's going to happen.
Oh man. Guilty as charged on that one.
It's a common one. So schema therapy helps people, first of all, identify, right, which schemas are causing the anxiety. And then you start developing strategies for your thoughts, for your feelings.
So it's like learning to talk back to that anxious voice in your head.
Totally. You challenge the negative beliefs, you work on regulating those emotions,
Yeah.
and you build self-compassion, which is huge.
It's like giving yourself a break.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
let's not forget relationships, right? Because schemas can really mess with those.
Oh, tell me about it. Like, I was just thinking, we pick partners who kind of confirm our schemas, even if they're not good for us.
It's called schema chemistry. And it's so common. You might be like subconsciously drawn to people who are going to treat you exactly the way you expect to be treated, even if it hurts.
It's like we're setting ourselves up for heartbreak.
It happens all the time.
Hmm.
But schema therapy, it helps you break out of that cycle. You start to identify those unhealthy relationship patterns, and then you get the tools to change them.
So instead of those same old patterns,
You make different choices. Choices that are like truly aligned with what you want, what you deserve.
man, I love that. It's like taking back control.
That's the power of it. But here's something really important to highlight. Schema therapy. It's not just for people with like severe mental health conditions.
So even if you don't have, I don't know, a diagnosed personality disorder,
It can still be super helpful for relationship stuff, low self-esteem, just feeling stressed all the time. We all have schemas. It's part of being human.
okay, so someone's listening to this and thinking, this is me, I need this. What's the next step?
Great question. And that's something we're going to dive into in the last part of our deep dive. We'll talk about what actually happens in a session, what techniques are used, and how to even find a qualified therapist.
Yeah.
Someone who really knows their stuff.
I can't wait. This has been like seriously eye-opening.
It's fascinating stuff. And I think the more we understand our schemas, the more power we have to, create the lives we want.
So deep divers, stay tuned. We've got more to uncover.
We're just getting started.
Okay, deep divers, we're back. Ready to wrap up our schema therapy exploration.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So we've talked about what these schemas are, how they develop, how they kind of mess with us. But let's get practical. What actually happens in a schema therapy session?
So usually it starts with a little bit of detective work. A good schema therapist, they'll work with you to figure out, like, what are your core schemas?
So not just like filling out a quiz and getting a label.
No, no, no. It's deeper than that. They really want to understand your story. How those schemas formed, how they're showing up in your life right now. And then you work together to come up with a treatment plan, a plan that's just for you.
Okay, that makes sense. But what does that plan actually look like? Like, what kind of techniques are we talking about?
One of the, I think one of the most interesting ones is called limited reparenting. Remember how we were talking about those unmet needs from childhood?
Yeah, those are rough.
So With limited reparenting, the therapist actually provides some of that, that emotional support, the validation that maybe was missing back then.
So it's like the therapist kind of steps in and fills those gaps.
In a way, yeah. It's not about replacing your parents, obviously. It's more about creating this safe space, right?
Mm.
Where you can actually experience what a healthy, nurturing relationship feels like
Right.
and start to heal those old wounds.
Man, that's powerful stuff. And what else? I remember the article mentioned something called cognitive restructuring.
Right. So cognitive restructuring is all about like tackling those thought patterns, the negative ones that are all fueled by the schemas. It's
Yeah.
like you're shining a light on those distorted thoughts and you're learning to see them differently, more realistically.
So like instead of thinking I'm a total failure,
Yeah.
it's
It's more like, hey, this one thing didn't work out. That doesn't mean I'm a failure as a person.
it's like learning to talk back to that inner critic, huh?
Exactly. You're not just letting it run wild anymore. And the cool thing is, schema therapy doesn't just stop at the thoughts.
Hmm.
It also helps you change your behaviors.
Oh, right, right. So like how does that work?
Well, they use all sorts of cool techniques, like role-playing or exposure therapy,
Hmm.
where you gradually expose yourself to the things that trigger you.
So you're not just talking about it, you're actually like doing things differently.
Yeah, you're getting out there in the world and practicing new ways of responding, which, let me tell you, can be scary, but it's where the real growth happens.
Makes sense. But I gotta say, this all sounds like a lot of work.
It is work. It's a commitment, for sure. And it takes time. It's not a quick fix. And the therapeutic relationship, it's got to be strong. You got to trust your therapist.
Speaking of which, how do you even find a good schema therapist? Like one who knows what they're doing?
Good question. The article recommended checking out the Schema Therapy Institute website. They've got like a directory, certified therapists all over the world.
Okay, cool. So Schema Therapy Institute, got it.
You can also look at those online therapy directories, like Psychology Today. Good therapy. Just make sure you're looking for therapists who specifically say they do schema therapy.
So specialist, not just a generalist.
Right. Now, before we totally wrap up, I want to go back to something we were talking about earlier.
Mm.
This idea that like schema therapy isn't just for, people with serious mental illness.
Exactly. We were saying even if you don't have a diagnosis, it can still be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, we all have schemas. They're part of being human.
Yeah.
And just understanding them, that can be so powerful
Mm.
for personal growth, for feeling better in your own skin.
It's like understanding the owner's manual for your brain a little bit.
I love that. Right. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's why I do that.
So deep divers, if you're feeling stuck, like those patterns keep repeating, give schema therapy a thought.
It's an opportunity to like break free from the past, rewrite your story, create a future that's more you.
I love that. It's about becoming the author of your life.
Yes. Not letting those old schemas call the shots anymore.
Well, I think we've officially reached peak deep dive level. What a journey.
It's been fun.
For sure. We learned so much about those hidden patterns, and how we can actually change them.
Thanks for diving in with us.
And remember, this is just the beginning. If you're curious about schema therapy, we've got tons of resources in the show notes.
Check them out.
Keep those schemas in check, deep divers. And until next time,
Keep exploring.
that's a wrap.